7 o'clock. No one ready? Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We'd like to welcome everyone to the Planning and Zoning meeting tonight on Thursday, November the 5th, 2020 in our new City Annex building. We appreciate everyone coming out tonight. Before I get started tonight, I know we have a quorum. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, including myself present. We have 3 on Zoom and 1 absent and 1 vacancy at this time. I'd like to start off the meeting tonight discussing some new rules that we're putting in place. At each public hearing tonight, when we present each public hearing, we will start off with our city staff. We'll present and request inclusion of necessary items into the record for us, followed by the applicant and the representative who is here to speak on behalf of that public hearing. They will have 10 minutes to speak on their event, what they're here to talk about. Following that, we will give the public, anybody in the public that has signed in, an opportunity to talk to us, the board, not to the applicant per se. He will be listening or she will be listening to your questions and comments. And then after you have 5 minutes to talk and bring forth what any concerns or questions or support of the project, you'll be asked to sit down. We'll give that opportunity to anybody. And then after that, we will turn it back over to the applicant, and he or she will have 5 minutes to address any concerns or issues that were brought forth during the public comments. Any questions at that? Hearing none, we're going to move on into our first public hearing tonight, and that will be the Bennington Apartments Conditional Use Permit -71. Good evening, Mr. Graville.
Good evening, honorable members of the Planning Commission. As a preliminary matter for this public hearing, there are 2 public hearings for Bennington Place Apartments. They will be done separately. The first one is the CUP 71, the conditional use permit. As a preliminary matter, I'd ask that the ordinances of the City of Warrenton be made a part of the record by reference, including the comprehensive zoning plan, the comprehensive plan being made a part of the record by reference, and the advertised publication be made a part of the record by reference, and finally the planning and zoning officer's report be made a part of the record by reference. The conditional use permit is a 0.76 acre application for purposes of developing apartments. It is a conditional use permit specifically for apartments. A couple of observations I want to point out in the new comprehensive plan. Staff did an analysis of the conditions required to be met in order for the Planning Commission to grant a conditional use permit, and staff is making a recommendation that the proposal will apply with the conditions. I think most importantly to point out to the Planning and Zoning Commission as part of our probably more, I know I'm going to say comprehensive a lot tonight, but more comprehensive approach to planning for this commission is number 1, the question of whether or not the conditional use will be consistent with the policies and intent of the Warrenton Comprehensive Plan and the Warrenton zoning regulations. And staff's comment and response is the proposed CUP is consistent with the plan policies of the comprehensive plan. The proposal provides a complementary land use situated between existing commercial and multifamily properties. With conditions recommended within this report, the proposal will comply with all applicable zoning requirements. And beyond that, the only staff recommendation for the consideration of the conditional use permit is that a final stormwater management plan shall be submitted in accordance with section 430.110 prior to approval of any building permits. With that, does the Planning Commission or any planning commissioners have any questions for city staff via Zoom?
And we are dealing with the CUP-71 first, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Graville. I don't hear any questions from the staff. At this time, we're going to open it up to the applicant and representative for the Bennington Place. You'll state your name for the record, and you'll have 10 minutes to speak on the project.
Sure. Bart Corman, for the record, with Lewis & Beatty, Surveyors and Engineers. I have with me today Colin Brookerhoff. Recently just took his PE exam and is with the Lewis Beatty team. He's going to be doing most of the presentation, and then Adam Pollard here, the owner under contract. So I'll turn it over to them, and I'll be here for any other questions.
Good evening. As Bart said, my name is Colin Bruckroff with Lewis & Beatty Surveyors and Engineers. Along here with Adam Pollard, the owner under contract for the development. What we've got is 2 units, 4-unit apartment complex, and then also a 6-unit building on that 0.76 acres. Addressing all city comments that were presented prior to this meeting, with the exception of the stormwater management plan, which we will address during the construction permitting phase. Worked through, I think a comment was a sidewalk along Arlington Way. We've added that in or incorporated that into the site plan, along with a lighting plan as well, which meets your guys' code requirements. With that, basically just open it up to any questions from the commission members. And if,
I've got a couple words to say.
Okay.
I'd just like to introduce our company to you guys. I did have a slideshow prepared. I don't know if she has it. Yes? Just showing some pictures. We're closing up on finishing the renovation of what once was Virginia Village. And I'd like to take a moment, go through and really go into depth on this. Our company is a family-owned and operated company, and from the very beginning we've made it our focus to provide the best rental experience possible for our residents, providing them with a place they can be proud to call home at a fair and honest price. Over the past 2 years, we've demonstrated our intentions and our ability to produce the highest quality rental units in the county through the successful renovation of the Broadstone Apartments and the complete transformation of the Virginia Village Apartments here in Warrenton. The demand for these units has been overwhelming, and to continue to meet that need, we are proposing an additional 10 townhome units. I'm coming for you today to seek that approval. I've got a couple photos. We can go through these quickly. This is just the befores of what I'm sure many of you are familiar with Virginia Village looked like, and then we can get to the after. I'm sure you're familiar with what the outsides looked like. We can keep going, and then the after. So these finishes are what we've included in every renovation that we've done in Warren County and what we intend on using here if approved. Some of these finishes include white shaker cabinets, quartz countertops, luxury vinyl tile throughout, stainless steel appliances, and for the buildings themselves, public laundry facilities. So as you can see, in my opinion, the asphalt did the biggest change for the good on the exterior of the building, along with some new signage, many new roofs. See there the new sign along the north service road. So what we're proposing is developing 10 brand new apartment townhomes to add to the Bennington Place Apartments. These units will provide a larger layout for residents with the same quality that they've come to expect. The area has already begun to transform into a great area for families as we've completed each building, working our way south towards the outer road. The lot is located directly behind our office on Arlington Way, where our property manager sits 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. This convenient location will allow for the efficient and easy oversight. We've worked very hard to build a sense of community here within this community, and we really look forward to growing it. As you can see here, it points out the lot. To the north, we have Arlington condos. To the west, we have Mosher's. To the east, we have vacant land currently zoned R3. To the south, we have the office or the apartments, currently Bennington Place Apartments. So as you can see here, here's the site plan that was produced by Lewis and Beatty. To the north, the 4-unit building. To the south, the 6-unit building. To the northeast, we have the retention pond, and what's hard to see here is the sidewalk that was added along Arlington Way.
I don't want to stop you there, but we're going to go to the site plan public hearing next.
Okay.
So they don't have to hear.
That's fine, I'll just do it once.
Yeah, you can just, but if you go to the other picture, you can probably talk about what surrounds there and the planning use as far as the surrounding uses, residential.
Okay. Yeah, to the north we have C2, I believe, and then it's R3 on the east and R3 on the south.
Anything else?
Yes, sir.
First of all, thank you for the improvements that you guys have done so far over there. It's been looking great, so.
Good to see.
Been good to see and looking forward to, and being a good working relationship with the city as well. Thanks, Bart. Thanks, guys. Thanks. So at this time, if anyone wants to address, if anybody at this time from the public wants to speak on behalf or against the Bennington Apartments Conditional Use Permit -71, now is the time to step forward. Hearing none, we'll not need to go back to the applicant to answer any questions at this time until we open it back up on the floor, and we will have questions for you at that time, sir. Thank you. Next, we'll turn it back over to Mr. Graville for the site plan -141.
Thank you, Chairman Barton. That was the public hearing for the conditional use permit, which is the land use requirement prior to having apartments. It is not an allowed use or a prohibited use. It is a conditional use. And as I stated before, the sole condition that we ask that Planning and Zoning Commission make if they consider approval of it is the site or the stormwater plan be submitted. For purposes of this next public hearing, we have Bennington Apartments SP 141. If you see up on the screen over there, you will see the site plan that has been drawn for, I believe it's 6-unit apartment and a 4-unit apartment. And this is regarding the 0.76 acres of land that we just discussed. As a matter for the public record, I'd ask that the public advertisement be made a part of the record in the Warren County Record. The Planning and Zoning Officer's report, which you all received prior to tonight, and the applicant received as well. And the municipal code of the city and the comprehensive land use plan of the city to be made a part of the public hearing record. The site plan, as is the city staff recommends approval of the site plan with the following conditions for the site plan: a detail of the trash enclosure verifying compliance with the Warrenton City Code to be provided to the city prior to the issuance of any building permits, and a completion escrow as required in accordance with section 430.125. Although that is required by code, we are asking for that to be made a condition of the site plan. Since we already kind of discussed what it looks like in the first public hearing, I'd entertain any questions from the commissioners or any of the commissioners attending via Zoom at this point. If there are none, I will turn it over to the applicant.
Does the applicant have anything else to add to the
Not really.
site plan?
The site plan, I pretty much went over already, so.
Okay. You guys okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody from the public would like to speak on the site plan from this applicant? Hearing none, we'll close that public hearing. And we'll turn the floor back over to Mr. Graville for our next public hearing, and he'll explain what the next step might be.
Okay, so as a preliminary matter, the best box storage ZC63 public hearing, the Best Buy, I keep saying Best Buy. I did that all day, by the way. Best Box Storage CUP 72 and Best Box Storage SP 142. All three of those public hearings are canceled for tonight. The petition has been withdrawn. We do anticipate that there will be a new public hearing advertised in December. That was one of the issues I think we discussed at the joint meeting, was making sure that we're complying with the comprehensive land use plan to have that, as you pointed out, and you've pointed out repeatedly, Commissioner Durbin, maintaining these critical commercial corridors for the city and not losing that infrastructure and that future land use along those corridors. And so Best Box Storage is working their plan to bring that back, and which I think is, a good result of staff working with the developer to do that. So we anticipate that'll be back sometime in December. So the next public hearing we're going to open up is the Estates at Pinckney Ridge, and that's ZC64. This is a rezoning request. And it is a rezoning request from Ag to R2. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I can turn around a little bit if you can't. Okay.
But those storage units there that they were going to put in, those are the ones what they're talking about putting on AA.
I don't know if they're talking about yes, but it's been withdrawn. That public hearing has been canceled for now. So we're not discussing it tonight. But that's a good question. But I would tell you watch the website. You know, we anticipate it'll come back up in December with a revised drawing and revised plans to look at. Okay, no problem. So this is Estates at Pinckney Ridge, and if I can, Brandy, in the sky, can you put up the land use map on this one? So this is a request for rezoning from Ag to R2, and this is as you can see, we spent a lot of time in the staff report detailing how this R3 zoning is consistent. The 33.21 acres is consistent with the comprehensive plan to rezone this to R3. There is contiguous R3 property already surrounding it. And staff has reviewed the request to rezone the site from Ag to R2 medium density single family residential. And the proposed rezoning is a logical extension of existing development patterns to rezone the subject site, which is now incorporated as part of the City of Warrenton. And we do recommend approval for your consideration of this rezoning request. For purposes of this public hearing, I would ask that the duly advertised public hearing notice in the Warren County Record be made a part of the record. The comprehensive land use plan of the City of Warrenton, which is part of what this report is based on, be made a part of the record. And the planning and zoning staff report, which is also made a part of I'd ask that be made a part of the record as well. That being said, I'm here to answer any questions. This is just the rezone. It's not the preliminary plat. We'll get to the preliminary plat later in the meeting, which describes the layout of the property and, you know, the responses to some city staff's questions regarding the development. If there are no questions from any of the commissioners, either present or on Zoom, I'd turn it over to the applicant to answer any questions.
The applicant is here. State your name, sir, for the record.
Hi, Steve Randall with Cochran Engineering.
Thanks, Mr. Randall. You have 10 minutes.
As far as the rezoning is concerned, there's honestly not much to say. So I leave it to any questions that anyone may have. I'll be speaking on the preliminary plat momentarily. So,
Thank you. Mr. Gravel, can you just remind anybody on the board that might not understand too, and for the public, just so first of all, that property was not a part of the city originally. It's been annexed into the city.
It has been annexed into the city, yes.
And so just to make sure that I don't misspeak is what I'm asking, is that when a piece of property is annexed into the city, it automatically comes in as Ag 1, and correct?
It comes in whatever zoning it had. I think that's a great question. And that's something we're trying to work on when we annex property in, because typically somebody comes in to annex it to the city for really, you know, one reason, and that's to get city water and sewer, because we really have a fantastic and dynamic water and sewer system. And they typically do it because they want to do some type of single-family residential. So we get these annexation petitions that come up spurned by the property owner, you know, a year or two before, and try to make people a little bit more aware of what their intent is, or what their stated intent is to come in. But to answer your question, when a property comes into the city, when a property is annexed in under Missouri law, it comes in under whatever current zoning it had under the prior, you know, so the county has a zoning plan. So if it was Ag under the county, it comes in as that county zoning until the city takes action to rezone that property. So this Ag designation was a designation it would have had prior to coming into the city. We did not rezone it. What we do in our comprehensive plan, and that's where we're really trying to stress that to the Planning and Zoning Commission, is we are looking and we are planning around for areas that will be annexed in for residential growth, industrial growth, commercial growth. So the comprehensive plan anticipates, and you read it for consistency with residential growth over here. So we work when developers come in, and if they came in and said, well, I want to do commercial here, we'd say, well, that's not consistent with the growth patterns anticipated by the comprehensive plan. So although we don't zone it, we do plan for it in case it does ever come in.
We will appreciate that, and I know the public will be more aware of that. Thank you, sir.
No problem.
All right.
I think you need a call for public comments. I know there was some people that had some questions.
Cool. So we are right now on the estates at Pinckney Ridge, zone change -64. So we'll give the public a chance to talk at this time. If anybody would like to come forth, state their name for the record, and ask any questions of the board at this time about the zone change. This will be your chance to talk at the meeting. Hearing none, we're going to move forward and close that public hearing. And we'll open up the next public hearing, which is the telecommunication towers and facilities.
Good evening. Same list of things. I'd ask that the City of Warrenton's comprehensive plan be made a part of the record, the city's municipal code be made a part of the record, the duly advertised public hearing for tonight be made a part of the record, and the very brief planning and zoning officer's report with regards to the ADM 110 public hearing. This is a code clarification. We're trying to go back and really clean up some of the language in our code. We do that from time to time. And essentially, the sole purpose of this public hearing and this code change is to have the language consistent in our code by amending and changing it from the planning and zoning officer to the Board of Aldermen's designee for purposes of telecommunication towers and facilities. And that's just making a more consistent use of who is the person that makes decisions in some of these administrative processes. We anticipate we'll have more coming across the plate on some of these telecommunication antenna towers because there's constant action in the state legislature, and we have other issues with it that we need to update the code. But the purpose of this is just to correct that use of the name in the code itself. So beyond that, if any of the commissioners present or commissioners on Zoom have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. If not, Commissioner Barton, there's no applicant.
Right.
It's just the
So,
city's
just city word. Okay.
change. So do you want to call for any public comments?
Is there any public comments on that one, though? Hearing none, we're going to move on to the zoning officer, ADM-111. Another clarification of
That's exactly
verbiage.
right. This is ADM 111. Same request that as part of the record, the city's municipal code be made a part of the record by reference to duly advertised public hearing for tonight in the Warren County record be made a part of the reference in the City of Warrenton's municipal code be made a part of the record by reference, and also the staff report with regards to this change request. As you stated, Commissioner Barton, you kind of stole my thunder, but this is a clarification of language stating the zoning officer is the same as the Director of Planning and Development. As we progress and the city grows, we want to make sure that this position has appropriate title and language so it's clear in the code. Beyond that, I have no further comment. And it's a city.
Anybody on the commission have any questions? Anybody in the public? Let's move on, close that public hearing and move on to the maintenance and supervision, ADM-112.
So ADM 112, this is a follow-up to a somewhat recent code change regarding maintenance and supervision. And this is really going to be something that I think out of our joint planning and zoning meeting you guys will see. Because it is a concern of Planning and Zoning Commission. We want to make sure it's consistent and our code is strengthened with regards to maintenance and supervision regarding these mail collector boxes, the revolution of the big box mailbox, and the stormwater improvements to make sure that that is clear in our code, the responsibility of the developer as they move forward, and then when it's turned over to the homeowners. For purposes of this public hearing, I'd ask the code be made city's municipal code be made a part of the record by reference, the comprehensive zoning plan of the city be made a part of the record by reference, the duly advertised public hearing for tonight's public hearing for this code change be made a part of the record by reference, and the planning and zoning officer's report be made a part of the record by reference. Now, this is not just a clarification, but I think, you know, planning and zoning commissioners, you guys will kind of remember when we did the change to really incorporate this, you know, mailbox so that there is some permanency and some maintenance, you know, that is required and some long-term requirements with regards to it. So if you guys have any questions, I'll be happy to answer those.
This is like where we were discussing, like,
Well, you remember
that damn wall over there.
Yeah, that was kind of one of the things is making sure it's clear that, you know, that is.
Someone's going to be watching this.
Yeah, that this long-term maintenance is going to be required, and whether that's an escrow or replacement cost or whatnot, that the city, you know, works with the developer to make sure that that's in place. Because where this really started was when we did the big box mailboxes, you know, the 20 mailbox units off the public right-of-way for safety reasons, was we didn't want to be in the business 15, 20 years from now of residents coming and saying, well, somebody hit it with their car, who's going to replace it? and we have to go back and say, well, you have to replace it. That's what's required. So it's clear up front, clear to the developers, and trying to anticipate problems down the road, and also bringing the stormwater into it as well.
Very good.
I have no further comments. I don't know if anybody has any additional questions.
Anybody from the public have a question on that one?
Is this retroactive to all? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean,
I didn't hear what he said, retroactive?
whether it's retroactive.
Right.
Retroactive is a difficult concept to apply because there will be some developments that are incomplete that may be 15 years old where this will apply, right? There'll be some developments because they've never, for example, when we had the housing crash in Warren County, most of those lots are built up right now, but there are still subdivided lots that are actual developments that the city approved 10, 15 years ago that don't have any houses on it. So when they come in for the preliminary and final site plan, they'll be affected by this code. So it's really Warrior Ridge where it's all completed. No, we're not going to, necessarily apply that to those. But, sometimes in zoning, you got to kind of figure out what you want and then apply it forward, and then to the ones that have not actually started construction, they will have some application to it. Okay, so Meadows of Walnut Hollow is a great example.
I kind of recall that there was a challenge that we were going to tie some of that responsibility to housing HOAs.
Well, stormwater has always been a HOA. The city is not MSD. We don't take over stormwater improvements. I think we've done a good job. Of course, I'm going to say that because I've been involved, but I think we've done a good job of working with homeowners associations to get their stormwater improvements, because typically how the call comes in, Commissioner Taylor, is we'll get a call that somebody will say, hey, you guys need to come and clean out our detention basin because it's all full of grass and, and weeds and there's snakes and whatever, and we look at it and we confirm that it's not a city-owned detention basin, because there are a few out there where we've taken over stormwater because of emergency situations, basically, or developers going belly up. And then we bring that information back to them and say, actually, you're the ones that are responsible. You should have a homeowners association and you guys need to get this done. So it's always been that the homeowners association is responsible, and that's really the way it is everywhere, unless the city, and this is not typically what happens because stormwater is expensive to take over, unless the city has a public stormwater system that they have in place.
Thank you for the clarification.
No problem. Any other questions? I have nothing further on that one, Commissioner Barton.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else want to talk on that? Hearing none, we're going to move on to our last public hearing, and that is site plan process ADM-113.
I guess we progress through these changes. They get a little bit more complicated as we go through the public hearings. As you said, Commissioner Barton, ADM-113 is a revision to our zoning code related to the site plan process. And, as we go on, I'd ask that the municipal code be made a part of the reference, the duly advertised public hearing be made a part of the record by reference, the planning and zoning officer's report, and the comprehensive plan be made a part of the record by reference. This is a code change that we think will provide quite a bit of flexibility for, especially people downtown that are reoccupying buildings in the city. As you guys will recall, a couple of years ago, all our site plans had to go through a public hearing. All our site plans had to go to planning and zoning and ultimately the Board of Aldermen. As we looked at that, especially when the economy was bad and people were trying to open up businesses in pre-existing buildings, it became cost prohibitive to do all the engineering and the drawings in order to do that. And really, we were not getting any new information because the buildings were already built. So we created a couple of years ago an administrative site plan process where basically if you weren't changing any of the exterior, just interior renovations, you did not have to get a full-blown site plan, which is really intended to be like the apartments where you're building a brand new project and you're looking at stormwater and all those other things. The purpose of this is to amend the code so that our administrative site plan process can be done and approved if the interior remodeling of the building, if the remodeling of the building or structure is no more than 10% of the main building or structure. And we think this will really assist some of our existing buildings right now and cutting down the cost for the developers to reoccupy buildings. It also adds that the site plan approvals will become invalid if the conditions are not met. We really don't have that trigger to say there will be, as we grow, we will get site plans. There will be a very, very important condition of that site plan approval for residents or for the commission or for the board. And so we want to make sure it's explicit that, look, if you don't meet these conditions, even though it's implied, we want to make sure it's explicit that if you don't meet these conditions, you no longer have a valid site plan. So we have enforcement mechanisms for those very important conditions that are added to site plans. So, for example, the apartments, and I hate to keep picking on the apartments, but the Bennington place, you know, if they don't submit their stormwater plan, you know, with their building permits as they begin construction phase, then we can tell them, hey, you don't have a valid site plan until you submit those. So it's just one more enforcement mechanism to make sure we gain compliance on our zoning requirements. And like I said, I think this 10%, you know, restriction there's a lot that fit into that very minimal, you know, renovation to the building that this will fit in, and we think will really help especially some of our downtown businesses.
Very good. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Graville? Anybody from the public? Hearing none,
Thank you, Commissioner.
we'll close our public hearings and open up any other public comments. And to speak in a public comment, you'd have to speak during the meeting.
So the first public comment, Best Box Storage Subdivision 82, that is taken off, that is canceled, and that has been withdrawn. Really, these are just listed here so that with our new policy and procedure for the public having an opportunity to speak on non-public hearing item agendas, we have this here just to, you know, it's not really withdrawn, but just to remind people that we'll probably see this sometime in December, you know, when this comes back up. And that's the subdivision request, which is not a public hearing, but you'd have an opportunity to comment on the subdivision at that point in time.
Will there be notices put out?
Yes, absolutely. New notices, new advertisements, and I would encourage you contact city staff if you want to get a copy of the reports beforehand. Okay. The second public comment is the subdivision request, the estates at Pinckney Ridge, and I believe the applicant is here to discuss this. It's not a public hearing. I'm not making anything part of the record by reference, but I would like to give the applicant an opportunity to kind of show his subdivision to the commissioners, and anybody from the public can ask questions about it at that time. At that point, I'll turn it over.
Thank you. Just take your name once again for the record, please.
Yes, sir. Steve Randall with Cochran Engineering.
Thank you, Mr. Randall. You may
I
have
believe we have the preliminary plat also, if we could show that. So basically it's kind of at the intersection of Warrior and Pinckney, running along Pinckney with two accesses. It's a subdivision of 98 lots. It hopefully will be R2 zoned by the end of the night. We've covered our bases as far as detention is concerned. For stormwater, we show all stormwater and sanitary water on there. Hydrants, the lighting. We've got two access, even though you don't really need two accesses until you get over 100 lots for fire. We show the cluster boxes with parking. Straight R2 zoning, there's no request for variances. It fits in with what's the surrounding area is calling for. It's agricultural on one side and to the south, and then to the west is R3, and a little further to the north is R2. So it kind of fits in that same mold. Most of the layout consists of cul-de-sacs, and we tried to fit as many walkouts as we possibly could. Usually a good selling point to people. And with that, if there's any other questions, comments?
I do want to make a couple of points, and I should have made this earlier because I did have a discussion with the engineer from Cochran earlier. There are 3 recommendations with regards to the preliminary plat. I don't believe they need to be made conditions, but 3 items that I think they have addressed or intend to address with the Planning and Zoning Commission and ultimately the Board of Aldermen. The first one is a parking lane designation plan to be included with the construction plans as required by 530.040 of the City Code. They're aware of that. and I understand you guys are going to address that. The second thing is there is the green space requirement for our subdivisions. This plan does not meet the green space requirement. However, it does allow the developer an alternative to pay into the city green space fund to be used for city municipal parks. And my understanding is they're still contemplating exactly what and how they're going to do that, but they will address that before the Board of Aldermen, and they do have that option under our code. And finally, prior to approval of a final plat, the completion escrows will be required for the public improvements for sewer, water, streetlights, sidewalks, and streets.
If I could, maybe a couple more quick things.
Yeah, go ahead.
Warrior Avenue is actually proposed to go through this property just as it shows on future planning for the city for the comprehensive plan. And so we've kind of mirrored that so that way it flows along. And this is phase one of possibly a future project, depending on how this goes. But at least it'll be stubbed out and, you know, city infrastructure can move forward in that sense. Also, along Pinckney Street, there's going to be a 10-foot dedication for the additional right-of-way that's not there to make it even on both sides. Obviously, the road is there, but the right-of-way isn't on one side so much. And 4-foot sidewalks are included through the entirety of the project and along Pinckney Street as requested by city staff.
Whoever's doing the computer, can you raise it up so we can see the bottom of the... Thank
Are
you.
you talking about Brandy in the Sky?
Yeah. Sounds like a song.
Is it going?
Yeah. You're on the right track.
A little bit slow.
So this,
Go any further?
so no, that's fine right there. So that, other houses, yeah, there are houses on the other side of that Highland Point
Yes.
Lane. So this Highland Point comes all the way around the project, basically.
Yes, it'll loop from Pinckney to Warrior, the Warrior extension, I should
The
say.
Warrior's going to cross Pinckney.
Yes.
So Warrior's at the top, if you look at your screen.
Yeah, Warrior's over here.
This is where she's got the cursor going, that's Warrior.
Okay.
Pinckney is over on the left-hand
Left.
side,
Right.
and Highland Point is at the bottom.
Yeah, I do want to make a point, because I think this is an important point that the engineer made, is that staff worked with the engineer and the owner of the property, and this is something we're going to be emphasizing moving forward. You have Pinckney that will divide the extension of Warrior Avenue over, but the alignment, the entrances and exits is really important for the future growth of the city, because if Pinckney were, I can't imagine that this ever would be the case, but if you ever had to, you know, put a street light in that intersection, that alignment, and for safety reasons, the alignment of having them directly across is so important to planning. So you are going to see an emphasis moving forward when we get new developments, aligning these across, because it's the safest and most logical way to lay out the street. So we don't have this kind of mismatch here that we kind of have in other areas of the city.
Good foresight.
And I do believe there's at least one person that would like to make a public comment here on this project.
Okay.
I just
You do need to come up to the...
Come on up to the podium and...
You can come up here and make your comment.
Yeah.
And ask any questions you have.
Just state your name first for the record.
Sandra Mertens.
Sandra Mertens. Thank you, Ms. Mertens.
When is this to start? When is it slated to begin, the development of it, as far as laying out the streets, or what comes first?
So first will be clearing, land clearance activity, and grading, typically. The next thing is they typically will, you know, this is a decent sized subdivision, so they'll probably develop the streets in phases. I don't know if you guys intend on doing all the streets at once, but it doesn't necessarily
always make sense. There are some connector streets, so there may be some main ones that are done. I don't know if you guys talked about that yet.
The idea is to do it all in one phase, and it would be a rough grading, basically clearing, rough grading, putting in streets, utilities, infrastructure, and then building in the lots themselves.
And then is there any kind of a buffer planned for the surrounding properties from the backyards potentially of all of these homes?
There are code requirements.
What are they?
For landscaping. I'm sorry, I can't.
I gave you my reports. They're probably covered in there.
It's probably in this?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, and then all of the water is supposed to go to that, all of it is going to go to that retention that's right here?
The way it's planned at this point, some of the lots below Highland will necessarily fall to the back. There's just no way to get it to go forward, or I should say north. But yes, the vast majority of the water for this property is to go to that detention basin.
So that might greatly affect that other property, though, that borders it to the south, if there's no official plan for where that water is going?
Well, our code specifically states that they cannot increase any stormwater, okay? And there will be engineering done. I don't know, is that part of the final plat stage? I don't know that off the top of my... Construction documents, and they will have to show us that they are not increasing any stormwater over to any neighboring properties.
That would probably be, I mean, the way it's laid out, it doesn't look like there's any accommodation for that to the south.
Right. Well, like I said, if that's the natural lay of the land, it sounds like it, because I think that's probably where they're going to put a lot of walkout basements. You know, there isn't necessarily an ability to stop what the stormwater that is already running off is, okay? But they can't increase it, so they can't cause an increase necessarily in the stormwater. And understand, as this is constructed, we do have lands clearance requirements that when they go in there, they're going to have silt fencing, they're going to have temporary measures, vegetation if it takes time for it to develop, so that the mud and stormwater runoff does not create siltation on neighboring properties. They can have no siltation run off their properties. And if they do, we do enforce that. This is more than an acre. DNR will have a requirement, and they'll have a permit with DNR that carries a pretty hefty $10,000 a day penalty and fine and fee. And like I said, I know it can be a little bit scary when you say this is all vegetated and now it's going to be cleared. Is it going to cause dirt temporarily, and then is it going to cause an increase in stormwater? Our code specifically requires them. So if ultimately, based on the preliminary survey and a final survey, there is an increase in stormwater, they will be responsible to fix that. So it's in their best interest as a developer to make sure that there is no increase, because they do have long-term liability, not only to the city, but to the residents, the residential property owner of that property as well.
And then is a copy of that, you know, that picture in this?
It should be there. Yeah, that is the planning and zoning officer's report. And I know you were here on it, so I figured I was finished with it. I'd give it to you, and then this will come up, you know, assuming it's approved, will come up to the Board of Aldermen. Do we know, Melody?
Should be November 17th, I believe.
You can check the website and...
So most of the clearing has been done on that property.
Oh, it has?
That property's cleared.
Oh, okay,
It's
so
big
they're probably
piles of
ready.
brush.
Yeah, they're probably ready. And sometimes they do the clearing activity early, because there's, you know, like when we did the overpass, there's like a native bat requirement that you can only clear during certain times. So you kind of take your shot and get down what you can. Did you guys have that requirement there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's the name of the bat that you have to watch out for?
Well, there's 3.
There's 2 more than when we did the city park.
Okay. So they're ready to go for developing these streets and doing all the grading and...
Rough grading plans are put together. They have not been submitted yet.
Okay.
But they do have to be approved, and as Mr. Burrell pointed out, there are incredible fines and restrictions on how this is to be done per city and state requirements, for that matter. And one of those is storm report. I'll have to submit a storm report. And for instance, the last one I did on something this size was almost 700 pages of calculations on how to not get that stormwater to run off in certain directions. And so it's a pretty precise precise and accurate thing.
And there are safeguards if
We'll
their
count on
precision
that.
is imprecise, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mertens. Thank you. Anyone else will have any questions at this time for the public comments? Okay, worked out tonight, so let's close the public comments and open up the regular planning and zoning meeting for tonight. First order of business will be our minutes from the last meeting, October the 1st, 2020. Anybody have any questions or comments about the minutes? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Propose a motion to accept the minutes from the last meeting.
Have a motion by Mr. Cooper, seconded by Mr. Taylor, to approve the minutes as submitted. Any questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Priest?
Abstain as I was absent.
Mr. Holt?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Mr. Costello is absent. Mr. Deach?
Yes.
Mr. Cullum?
Yes.
Mr. Barton?
Yes. Motion passes 7-0 with one abstention and one absent and one vacancy. Next order of business will be, says to discontinue Zoom meetings, but we're going to remove that from the item because of an uptick.
Yeah, I just want to make a quick comment on
Sure.
that, why that's on the agenda. The so we moved in this building because of the pandemic.
Right.
30 days to 45 days early. So the technology, the recording equipment, the audio equipment, when we first had our first meeting in here, we literally had like an old Radio Shack stereo projecting out there to try to, accommodate larger crowds and social distancing. We had some real problems with our technology and they identified it as a hardware failure. So, obviously the best meetings are when they're in person where people can speak, and then and we had some problems with realizing that there were people that wanted to speak. So, although it's off the agenda for tonight, I just wanted to explain why we have that is just for purposes of, we've always recorded our meetings, put them on YouTube as quickly as they're ready to go. And obviously we'd like to move away from that at some point, but that really was brought about because we're really struggling with the technology of it. So we're good. They've got it worked out. They've got the hardware issues worked out. Hopefully the audio is loud and clear on not just the Zoom meeting tonight, but the recordings as well. But that's why we had that on there is just where we were being, 30 to 45 days early in the building. The building was not set up yet for it. As you saw some of the temporary things that have now gone away because they're finishing it as we move along.
Thank you. Next order of business will be to approve the public hearing comments policy. And it seemed like it looked like it went pretty well tonight.
Yeah, I'll say to that, and I don't necessarily have to make a comment on everything in the agenda tonight, but this is something the Board of Aldermen put together to have a little bit more orderly progression, and you all set your own policies on public comments and public, hearings, and you have the right to suspend the public comments at any time, even at a meeting. You can say, we're not going to have public comments tonight if you have them, but we looked at a lot of cities, we talked to a lot of cities about processes, and as we move forward with more and more development, as you can see, we're pretty busy tonight. We just think this will help us have an orderly policy because, what we've learned is, in talking to a lot of other cities, is that, a lot of people don't know what they're walking into or what to say, and so we're going to really push this concept, and we'd like to have them consistent, but ultimately it's up to you guys to approve this policy. And hey, look, if this is not working in a particular meeting, not working long-term, we can change it. We're just trying to kind of get some guidelines so people walking in that really don't know what these meetings are all about have some guideposts to go by.
Sounds good. You guys have questions about the public hearing comment policy that we got in place?
Is there any other avenues, I don't know, Mr. Gridley, if you can answer this. Is there any other avenues to broadcast these guidelines? I mean, public coming in, one issue affects them maybe once in 5-10 years,
Yeah.
and things can change from here to there. So I don't know if I feel like there's going to be just a constant battle to enforce these types of guidelines, which are good as printed.
I will tell you, as redundant as it sounds, talking to other cities, we talked to cities in St. Charles, cities in St. Louis counties, The best way to do it, in their experience, is basically, we've got these cards, and as Commissioner Barton stated, is you read it before the public hearing starts, and then also have it on the website and whatnot. So, you know, I think it's just going to kind of be a work in progress, and it's not always going to be perfect. We're always going to be battling with people wanting to finish their comments and rolling over. You know, we talked about at some point maybe having, you know, a lighting system as we fully move into this, or a clock or something like that to give them, you know, something more visual to know what their time left is. But, you know, absolutely, we don't want to, you know, stifle any public comment, but we also want to make sure it's orderly. But we'll keep working on that, and honestly, Commissioner Hold, if you have any suggestions as well, you know, we're open to do it, because, you know, we just want to put these things in place, see how they work. If they're working well, great. If there's tweaking we got to do, we'll tweak them.
Awesome, thanks.
Mr. Gavril, your 5 minutes is up.
Oh, I think, I haven't gotten the look from Melody yet, so.
I did wear my tie tonight, so. All right.
Try to get you as much FaceTime as possible,
I know, see?
Commissioner Barton.
All right. So if there's no other further questions, good question, Mr. Holt. We're going to entertain a motion for that? Is that what we're going to do? Entertain a motion to approve the public hearing comments policy tonight?
I move that we approve the public hearing policy as pursuant to 89.050 revised statute, state of Missouri.
Okay, got motion by Mr.
Seconded.
Dietz, second by Mr. Cooper.
Cooper.
To approve our public hearing comments policy. Any other further questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Priest?
Yes.
Mr. Holt?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Mr. Deach?
Yes.
Mr. Cullum?
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0 with one absent. Next order of business will be the Bennington Apartments Conditional Use Permit -71. So, anybody on the commission have any questions that they wanted to particularly bring up at this time?
This list I got,
Say it
this
again?
list we got for, at the beginning, has
Has
that
been-
all been?
Yes, Mr. Gavril had mentioned that in his initial comments
Comments.
that number one was the one that was the most,
I think it was the most relevant. I know
Relevant to
there's, I mean, always a lot of concerns about the commission. I just wanted to highlight that comment about, you know, what are we doing growth pattern wise? And Commissioner Durbin's, you know, uses the example, you know, that really applies to a lot of things, or why are we putting apartments right out the highway that's a, you know, core retail corridor area. So that's one of the things we're going to bring back in our reports is this consistent? It is consistent with our comprehensive plan, because it kind of transitions the commercial to the single-family residential.
the one thing that we do need to make sure that we state in the motion is that the final stormwater management plan will need to be submitted at that time as well.
That's some for the the CUP continuous use permit?
That's for
Or is
this
that for
conditional
the,
use permit, yeah. That's just
SP?
CUP 71, yeah.
Yeah.
Entertain a motion for that?
I move to accept the Bennington Apartments CUP-71 to be approved.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. Durbin. We have a motion by Mr. Cooper, second by Mr. Durbin to approve the Bennington Apartments Conditional Use Permit -71. Also with the comment that a final stormwater management plan will need to be submitted prior to the signing of the final plans. Any other questions or comments? Roll call vote?
Mr. Deach?
Yes.
Mr. Cullum?
Yes.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Priest?
Yes.
Mr. Holt?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Passes 8-0 with one absent. Next order of business will be the Bennington Apartments Site Plan -141. And as you can see on there that there were some things that needed to be talked about on that. If anybody have any questions about anything like that, such as the trash shed closure, the escrow completion, will all need to be taken care of before signing the final plats
Maybe a quick question for Mr. Pollard. On one of the slides, I noticed there was coin-op laundry that's public access for the residents. Speaking from personal experience, what kind of security is implemented in that location? Is it card entry or?
So those are for our existing buildings already. The new
Okay.
ones that have washer and dryer hookups within them.
Okay.
Security that's there is a push-button key code
Okay.
lock.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hope. And we had mentioned something about the sidewalk and lighting plan. Those have been,
Yeah, I believe their drawings have been modified to include those as part of the site plan, right, Mr. Corman?
It was in the revision document.
it was in the revision. And then the other two things will be taken care of before the signing of the final plan, final plans. Okay. Any other questions from the board? Entertain a motion?
Recommend approval of Bennington Apartments SP 141 as written.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Taylor, second by Mr. Holt to approve the Bennington Apartments Site Plan -141, including the trash enclosure and escrow completion will be required prior to signing the final plans. Any other questions or comments? Roll call vote?
Mr. Cullum?
Yes.
Mr. Barton?
Yes?
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Priest?
Yes.
Mr. Holt?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Mr. Deitch?
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0 with one absent. We'll skip down to item number 9, or number 10, the estates at Pinckney Ridge. Zone change -64. This is for the 33 acres on the intersection of Pinckney and Warrior. And they're asking to change the zoning from ag to R2, which is stated by the city meeting that it's logical existing things over there that it just flows with the comprehensive plan. So does anybody on the board have any questions or comments for the applicant? Appreciate you being here tonight too, sir, and stating good to work with you, and nice that you're working with your neighbors there as well. That's nice. So anybody else have any questions for him? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion.
We accept it. We have a motion by Mr. Durbin to accept the estates at Pinckney Ridge Zone Change 64.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Cooper. Let's see here, 64. We're really no concerns of adding anything to that extent at that time. So anybody else have any questions or comments at this time? We'll entertain, or we'll do a roll call vote and for Mr. Durbin and Mr. Cooper's motion.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Priest?
Yes.
Mr. Holt?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Mr. Deitch?
Yes.
Mr. Cullum?
Yes.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0 with one absent. Next order of business will be the estates at Pinckney Ridge Preliminary Plat Subdivision -83. And this is the one that we were looking at a little bit ago, and Ms. Mertens had questions about there, and I think they addressed her situations on the back part of that with the overflow of the drainage. I think that there's some green space that needs to be taken care of as far as a park fund or escrow into that as well. And parking lane designation plan to be included. Do you understand what they mean by that? Okay, I'm sure you did. I just making sure you had it on record. And all that will be taken care of prior to the final plat approval into the park fund and completion of your escrow. Anybody else have any questions for the subdivision -83 estates at Pinckney Ridge? Entertain a motion.
Make a motion to accept Sub-83.
Seconded.
Motion by Mr. Holt, second by Mr. Cooper, to approve the Estates at Pinckney Ridge preliminary plat subdivision -83. Any questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Mr. Priest?
Yes.
Mr. Holt?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Mr. Deach?
Yes.
Mr. Cullum?
Yes.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0 with one absence. And then we'll get into our sections of the handbook, rules and regulations of the city ordinances, and some of the verbiage that is being cleaned up and trying to get cleaned up a little bit to make it easier to work with and understand for the folks. So section 405.280, dealing with telecommunication towers and facilities, ADM-110. Were there any questions about that? Basically, it was to amend the code and change from planning and zoning officer to the Board of Aldermen's designee, so pretty straightforward. Any questions or comments? Entertain a motion?
Make a motion to accept ADM
Yep. 110.
110.
Okay. Motion to approve by ADM-110 by Mr. Cooper, seconded by Mr. Mr. Holt. Thank you, buddy. Mr. Holt. Any other questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Mr. Holt?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Mr. Deach?
Yes.
Mr. Cullum?
Yes.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Priest?
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0 with one absent. Next order of business, 405.310, zoning officer at ADM-111. That's the one that's to amend the code so that states zoning officer is the same as the director of planning and development, just to clean up some of the verbiage there. Any other questions or comments about ADM-111? Hearing none, we'll entertain a motion.
Move to accept 405.310 for zoning officer and amend change.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Taylor, second by Mr. Cooper to approve officer 405.310 zoning officer ADM-111. Any other questions? Roll call vote.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Mr. Deach?
Yes.
Mr. Cullum?
Yes.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Priest?
Yes.
Mr. Holt?
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0 with one absent. And the last order on the agenda tonight is section 405.390, site plan process, ADM-113.
Skip
one.
410, 190.
Oh, did I miss one ahead of it?
Yeah, we need to
I was
do
testing
one
you
more.
guys.
Yeah, it's all right.
We win.
Mr. Deach, it's past his bedtime. I've got to help him out here a little bit. Oh, wake up, Mr. Deach. All right, section 4.10.190, maintenance and supervision, ADM-112. Sorry about that. That's the one that is dealing with, includes the collector box units, mailbox units, and the stormwater improvements that we talked about at our last meeting, making sure that they're continue to be taken care of in the future. Any other questions or comments? Entertain a motion.
I'll move to motion section 410, 190, ADM-112.
I'll second it.
Have a motion by Mr. Holt, second by Mr. Durbin to approve 410.190 maintenance and supervision ADM-112. Any other questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Mr. Deach?
Yes.
Mr. Cullum?
Yes.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Priest?
Yes.
Mr. Holt?
Yes.
And Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0 with one absent. Last order of business, number 15, 405.390, site plan process ADM-113. This is to amend the code that the administrative site process plan can be done and approved for remodeling or building structure of no more than 10% of the main building. Help our folks downtown, maybe help them a little bit, get things moving a little faster. So, any other questions or comments? Entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion, we accept M113.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Durbin, second by Mr. Taylor to approve ADM-113, 405.390 site plan process. Any other questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Mr. Cullum?
Yes.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Priest?
Yes.
Mr. Holt?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Mr. Deitch?
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0 with one absent. This time we'll close the meeting and turn it over to Mr. Graville, Miss Melody. Do you guys have anything for the good of the group tonight?
I don't know, do we? Brandy, do we have anything you want to update them on?
I don't really have much updates except that we will have a meeting in December that will have these, the ones that were canceled tonight. Those should be on the December meeting. That's really all that I have right now.
You guys have anything for the good of the group? Mr. Deitch, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Seconded by who?
Me.
Mr. Cooper, second that motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Good night. Thank you for coming out.